This is the conference championship game that will have the most talent, speed, athleticism on one field. It's the SEC title game in Atlanta with LSU taking on Georgia. We got Palmer Thomas on the line from Dogs 247 Sports. Palmer, how you doing?
Doing well. I mean, we've been talking all season, and I think a lot of the lead up has been to a game like this. You know, Georgia advancing out of the East, and so I think it's definitely an exciting matchup against a very, very tough LSU team, number 2 in the country for a reason. And they've been at number 1 for a significant portion of the, college football polls. So should be a great game in Atlanta. I'm really looking forward to it.
MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football, breaking down all the conference championship games, including, of course, Georgia and LSU, a must-win for the Dogs. The LSU Tigers probably still in the college football playoffs, even with a loss. As we break this one down based on what Kirby Smart had to say following the Georgia Tech 52-3 win, the players, the media news conference, weekly conference that they've had already this week, what seems to be the standout narrative in regards to what the players and coaches are talking about?
Yeah, we've heard from Kirby twice already this week, and we'll hear from him again later today. This is very much a game that's defined by strength versus strength. You've got a great, incredible LSU offense that set a ton of records, broke LSU records, broke SEC records, yada, 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 versus an incredible Georgia defense that ranks among the best in the country. So, you're going to have, Heisman favorite Joe Burrow on one side versus not necessarily a lot of big names, but a great defense on the other side. Guys like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson for LSU, those receivers, they're going to probably be challenged by one of the best secondaries that they'll play all season. And you look at LSU, they've put up 40-plus points in all the games but one. Came against Auburn when they played, when they were held to 23. And so, Coach Orgeron compared Georgia's defense to that Auburn defense, saying that it's one of the best that they've played so far. And, statistically, Georgia's defense probably is on the same level as Auburn's. And, look at who's held the Tigers to, their lowest point total this season. So I think that's the biggest storyline, strength versus strength, LSU offense versus this Georgia defense.
Got Palmer Thomas on the line. You can join him at Dogs 247 Sports. This is the week to do it as we prepare for the SEC championship game. And, of course, the Dogs bowl or playoff bid after that that comes up on Sunday. Yeah, it's certainly a matchup in which most people that don't really grind down to the granular in regards to breaking down these teams, but think, okay, LSU is just scoring at will against just about everyone. Is Georgia going to be capable of keeping up with that rather than, okay, the Georgia defense is going to put on the clamps to a certain extent. It's impossible to stop this offense, but in regards to getting enough stops to win the game and let this become more of a Georgia game, it seems like people are focusing on, can Georgia keep up? And I tend to understand that, but it can be flipped around as well in regards to the LSU defense being rather liberal and giving up points and yardage. And the Georgia offense, even though it's not designed to stretch the field and put up the points and yardage and play at the tempo that Joe Burrow and company have been, they certainly have the talent to do it.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think a lot of people take this Georgia defense, even Georgia fans here in Athens, take this Georgia defense for granted. I don't think a lot of people realize, exactly what they've done to go an entire 12-game regular season, allowing just one rushing touchdown, to hold some of these offenses that they've played to, 21 or below points most of the time. It's something that I think a lot of people have taken for granted and just kind of looked at it saying, well, LSU's scoring a lot. That's what's making national headlines. It's what's going to, draw people to this game. Offense, people like points. And so, that offense is what's making the headlines. But like you said, this Georgia defense is great and very capable of slowing down that LSU offense. But like you said, I do agree with you. I think this game is going to be decided on the other side of the ball when Georgia's on offense and LSU's on defense. LSU gave up over 400 yards to Ole Miss on the ground. What does Georgia want to do? They're very reliant on their run game. DeAndre Swift, he's a little banged up, and I think his health is a big storyline this week. But Swift and company very well could be able to take over this game on the ground, facing up against that LSU defense. And then, just looking beyond that, Jake Fromm at quarterback has played some of his best football in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I think that experience factor playing there. And then Georgia, we talked to Jake after the game on Saturday, and he said it's very comfortable playing there. I mean, you look at some of his worst games to date, Kentucky in the weather, A&M in a little bit of weather, he'll be playing, and it's not going to be raining in a dome, and it's going to be 75 degrees. So I think there's a big comfort level for Jake from playing in that dome, knowing the conditions he's going to face, and then for that Georgia offense, knowing that they can run the ball, and that's kind of a weakness of this LSU defense. They've got great secondary with Grant Delpit back there. It's Derek Stingley as well, and it's a great LSU defense, especially in the back half. But I think Georgia can win this game up front and kind of take advantage at the line of scrimmage and use that running game and willingness to rely on the running game to their advantage.
Yeah, the two teams are inverse images of each other. The LSU offense is gaining the headlines. It's putting up the big points. It's the reason they're 12-0. It's the Georgia defense that is the reason. Mostly, it's not quite as imbalanced, I don't think, but it's mainly the Georgia defense that has spelled an 11-1 season for the Bulldogs, while the offense has been underwhelming. The LSU defense against the likes of Ole Miss and Vanderbilt and on down the line has given up at points and yardage at an alarming rate. If you look at the talent on the two teams and the recruiting rankings, if there's an advantage there, it would go to Georgia. But basically, they both have elite talent. So it begs the question, why is the Georgia offense not more productive? Why is the LSU defense giving up so much when they have, first-rate athletes on all three levels? And those are just some of the dynamics of football, that the talent has to be combined with the development of the players, the coaching scheme, and the strategy and everything else to combine to develop into a first-rate unit. And LSU hasn't gotten there on defense, even though they certainly have the components from a talent standpoint. And the Georgia offense, I wouldn't be surprised to see it explode against an LSU defense that has been subpar for a portion of the season. Most likely, we're going to get this balanced out to a certain extent, and we're not going to see a 52-48 game, and we're not going to see a 10-7 game. We're going to see plays made by both units against each other, and I would be surprised if it's not a very close game. I understand Georgia, people look at the offense, they're enamored with the offense, and LSU scoring on everyone, but Georgia's too good to get run out of the building.
Yeah, and I mean, you compare it to the game last year against Alabama in this same situation in a lot of ways, that Alabama came in, prolific offense, beating, teams by 20-plus points. And Georgia was, it's not the same Georgia team where, the defense was kind of a question there, whereas the offense was, clicking on all cylinders. But I think a lot of people looked at that game, and, I mean, Georgia was a double-digit underdog. Not nearly as much this week against LSU. It's sitting around 6-ish right now. Opened, as low as 3.5. I've seen it 6.5. And so, I think in a lot of ways you can compare it to that game. You look at Georgia's big games over the years; they've played close games. It was took a touchdown in double overtime against Oklahoma to win that Rose Bowl in 2018. Lost by a last-second touchdown against Alabama in that 2018 national championship game. Lost on a late touchdown to Jalen Hurts in the 2018 SEC championship game. And so there's no reason to think that Georgia's not going to show up and play to the caliber of their opponent. You look at Georgia against the spread, they haven't been great because they've been a favorite, but I think that's more of an indication that when they are a favorite, they kind of play down to their level of competition. Maybe not all the way down, say like they did against South Carolina when they were heavy favorites and ended up losing that one. But I think Georgia has been able to kind of get by and win some of these games in ugly fashion. I mean, that most recently against Texas A&M, that's a game that comes to mind there. It wasn't all pretty on Saturday against Georgia Tech. I mean, Georgia turned the ball over several times. Tech had their little run where they recovered a muffed punt, went on to score, kicked an onside kick, recovered that, and had a little bit of momentum there. Georgia was held to 17 points in the first half, and I think a lot of people were, kind of nervous. It was never, a feeling in that stadium that, oh, Tech is going to win this game. It was Georgia needs to be winning by more than they are. And so Georgia plays to the level of their competition. Like I said, that last year against Alabama, they probably weren't, they were not the better team on that field. There's a reason that Alabama came into that game number one, reason that a lot of people still look at them as one of the best football teams, college football teams in a long time. And so Georgia played to their competition, level of their competition that game, and I have no reason to doubt that they'll do that on Saturday against LSU.
We know Jake Fromm needs to pull through in this one and deliver. We'll take him out of the mix. Give me a player on offense. Give me a player on defense that you think need to have an impact.
Yeah, I'll give you two on offense because I think when you look at Georgia's offense, the biggest question mark is they're down two receivers. Lawrence Cager out, had an ankle injury week of practice before Georgia Tech. Had successful surgery on that Friday before that game, but he won't be playing Saturday, and he's doubtful to be suiting up in red and black again. Graduate transfer from Miami, has been a big key to Georgia's offense. Has kind of been a go-to guy for Jake Fromm. And then add on to that, George Pickens getting ejected in the third quarter of their most recent game against Tech for fighting, and so he'll be missing the first half of this game. So I think looking at those two guys, you've got to highlight the receivers. Two guys that come to mind for me are Dominic Blaylock, another freshman, kind of like Pickens. He's quietly put together a really good, really impressive freshman season. Is among the team leaders in touchdowns. He's second there, third in yards. Looking at that, he's fifth in receptions. So to turn his not necessarily a low reception number, but lower than some into higher yards and higher touchdowns, he's been really productive. And another guy I think is Tyler Simmons. He's another wide receiver there, senior. I think his biggest storyline of his career is, was he onside, was he offsides in that 2018 national championship game? And I think a lot of people know him for that. He hasn't had his best senior year. He's been banged up, but he's come on strong lately. And I think had a touchdown against Tech, had a big reception against Texas A&M. I think he's a guy that could really make an impact. Defensively, you got to look at the secondary. I think with the ability of Texas A&M to spread it out, go empty set, move Clyde Edwards-Helaire out of the backfield, and use him as a wide receiver. I would look at guys like Mark Webb, Devon Wilson, Tyreek Stevenson there. Kind of those hybrid linebacker, cornerback type guys playing the star and the money position for Georgia in their dime and nickel packages. Those are two or three guys that I would look at defensively that I think they've really got to step up. And then add to that that dynamic ability of Edwards-Helaire. I think you got to look at the inside linebackers, and also the inside linebackers are going to have some responsibility in making sure that Joe Burrow doesn't beat them with their feet. He had 100 yards last year against big game, 2 touchdowns last year against Georgia on the ground. Had a nice long run, and I think a lot of guys in the middle there like Monty Rice, Tay Crowder. They Georgia may have to use a spy against him in times. That role could go to Adam Anderson or Nakobe Dean when they go to those heavier pass coverage sets with more coverage guys in the game. But those guys in the middle, I think they're going to have a big responsibility. So I know you asked for one on both sides, but I gave you several, two key positions on both. And this is a game that I think Georgia's got to play really well to win this game. And so a lot of guys have got to step up and play their, maybe not the best game that Georgia's played, but I think, that they've got to step up and play.
Palmer, I love the personnel. I love the rosters. I want to know who's out there. So you can throw me as many players as you want when you break down these games. No question about that. I will be locked in, as will College Football Nation. It's the SEC championship game. It's always a good one. This year, we've got a rematch of, let's see, I think these two got together in 2011 in the SEC championship game with LSU marching on to the BCS title game. And sometime in the early 2000s, around 2003,
they have played 3 times in the SEC championship. I believe it was 2005, one of the earlier
Okay.
And then once
right.
before then, LSU has won 2 of the 3 matchups in this scenario, and Georgia won 1 in between with David Green at quarterback for the Bulldogs.
Yeah, I think we're looking at 03, 05, and 11 off the top of my head.
Or DJ Shockley, one of the 2.
Yep. All right, good stuff from Palmer Toms. Please join him and the rest of the crew there at Dogs 247 Sports to get yourself ready for the big LSU game on Saturday afternoon. Palmer, we appreciate you stopping by. Enjoy the game, and hopefully we'll have you back for a playoff preview.
Absolutely, I think
regardless of the bowl bid, we'll have you back on to talk it, but we'll think positively for you.
Appreciate it. With a game like this, throw out all the stats and let the big boys play football on a big stage. It should be a great game in Atlanta, and I'm really looking forward to it.